are back on the Zero Hour. I'm your host, Richard RJ Eskow. Joining me now is my friend Kymone Freeman. I haven't talked to Kymone for a long time. It feels like, anyway. So welcome back, my friend. Good to see you. Now, since I'm not coming down to Anacostia while we're locked down, I feel like I never see you anymore.
Well, we miss you, but next time it's 420. We'll have some gift bag for you.
All right. Okay, well, I am vaccinated, so I can travel now. I see that at WEAC Radio and Anacostia, you're having concerts again, too. So I want to make the next one.
Socially distanced outdoor performances, yes.
All right. Well, that's good to know. And before we even get into, is there some place where those of us in the D.C. area can find out what's going on there? Is there like...
Yeah, follow WEAC Radio on all the relevant social media. And definitely subscribe to our YouTube channel because everything gets posted. And for those who haven't gotten vaccinated yet and are planning to get vaccinated, if you get vaccinated in D.C., they give you a free joint.
They do not. Oh, you mean you do? Wow, all right.
No. DC MarijuanaJustice.org. DC MarijuanaJustice.org. And other cities as well are replicating it, but it was originally implemented here in Washington, D.C. on 420, and it's going to continue on for the foreseeable future.
Well, you remember what Peter Tosh said, right? In Jamaica, he said, legalize it and I will advertise it. And you, my friend...
I would take it further. I say just decriminalize it.
All right. I totally support that. I 100% support that. You can't legislate morality, as some conservative once said. And why should you try? But that's not what we're here to talk about, Kymone Freeman. And again, for those of you who don't know Kymone, he's an artist, he's an activist, he's a co-founder of WEAC Radio, where this show originates from. And I guess I would say, I was just looking up before you came on, the latest of what people are saying regarding the Derek Chauvin verdict and the George Floyd trial. And I wanted to talk to you in particular about it, because I think I'm going to try to see how best to put this. I think you have a good, almost vertical and horizontal view of this in terms of it being an issue for the community, George Floyd's community, for the Black community, but also horizontally for society as a whole. And to me, it feels like a lot of the reactions, a lot of the commentary are coming from this kind of one... well, this is what it means. It means something for Black people or what have you, which of course it does. But it doesn't address, to me, the broader issues. Well, I'll put my cards out on the table right up front, so you know where I'm coming from, which is this. It doesn't address my belief, anyway, that as long as we have greed and inequality and capitalism of the kind we've come to have, we will always have violent police. And that the racism of that violence, maybe it can be kind of squeezed, tamped down a little bit here and there, but it's fundamentally an unjust system. And, Kwame Ture co-wrote a book back in 1967 saying everybody sees it when the police beat a Black person on the street. Nobody sees it when that same person's family is starving or can't get a home, or the home that they have is falling down. And so I guess that kind of lay it out. That's what I wanted to explore, was I feel like a lot of people are addressing this, whether it's in the media or politics or whatever, but in a way that doesn't challenge their own power dynamics. Do you get what I'm trying to get at?
Absolutely. And I just want to throw out there that one of our political prisoners, incarcerated journalist, Mumia Abu-Jamal, underwent heart surgery this last week, and we need to follow his case because he's accused of defending himself against police violence and has been held ever since. So I want to urge your listeners nationwide to go check out freemumia.com for more information about that, because I think what this George Floyd case clearly exhibits is what we've been saying all along. There's two different kinds of policing in America, and we have begun the brunt force of that. Even the FBI 2006 FBI report confirms that law enforcement has been, quote unquote, infiltrated by white supremacists. So we've been subjected to this type of domestic terrorism since we came to the shores of America. So therefore, any case that has garnered a conviction solely on police testimony should be reviewed. And this is one of those cases. So freemanmedia.com for your listeners. Now, having said that, in this case, I don't feel the celebratory feelings that so many people were almost dancing in the street about and breaking their arms and patting themselves on the back about, because this was a case that took a global movement of protesting, took a minor to videotape and document multiple witnesses, storefront footage, and other police officers to testify against another officer, which is unheard of in the United States of America. And even with all of that, we could not believe our lying eyes, because there was still a possibility, and we all knew it, that he could get off, that somehow this is America. And because of that question mark in our mind, that is proof of the depth of the problem that we face here in America's reckoning with its foundation. And this foundation is rooted in the redcoats from the British, who were brutal, to the slave patrols who were empowered and brutal, to today. And until we begin to recognize that, we're going to always have these problems. And even the day that he was convicted, surprisingly, there are still Black people being murdered by the police. And so I just wanted to point out in the recent case, and the one of the young girl that I think it was Micaiah Wilson, is the young lady's name, had a knife, but Rittenhouse had a AR-15, you know, and she had a knife. Okay, is she still a child surrounded by police? When you get to a fight, what are you supposed to do? Break the fight up. You don't go out shooting people, you know. So I just want to put that out there. And one of the things that I wanted to also, I'll give you time to respond to that before I get into my next topic here.
Yeah, and I did want to, because a couple things. One is I'm sure you saw it, but there was an article just the other day, got no attention, even in the middle of all this, saying that there was a ring of cops in Baltimore who kept toy guns to plant on, let's face it, Black victims, that after they murdered them, they could put the gun on them and say, well, they were brandishing this. I thought it was a weapon. So, you have this.
Yeah, they call them burners.
Burners, is that what they call it?
Yeah.
And, and I've written myself about the kind of white masculine culture that I grew up in that exalted a certain kind of violence. In my case, it wasn't expressed as racist violence, but in the white working class world that I grew up in, a man was only a man when he, could brutalize or kill his enemies. And even though I had a fairly, kind of liberal family, that was all around me. And you take these men like Derek Chauvin and you breed them for that, and you select them for that. And you encourage, they have police training programs, about them, where they basically teach them that everybody in that community you're policing is your potential killer and your enemy. And then you have a guy like Chauvin just like gloating as he's strangling a man to death. Monsters, but I feel, socially speaking, and this is not, believe me, not to exonerate him, far from it, there are monsters, though. I feel like this society as a whole breeds Derek Chauvins. And okay, one, like you say, one gets put in jail, but it took a global movement, and it was a toss-off. Still could get overruled. Still could get retried.
Because I see no difference between, Eric Garner's murder on television and Eric Garner's murder on television. I see no difference. They both said I can't breathe. We all see that. Why you let the guy go? But in New York, the NYPD is the largest police force in America, and they all support Trump. So they all for this continued oppression and brutality. And I also want to get this point in that you are aware that they're criminalizing protesters right now. That they're creating
Right.
laws to criminalize protesting. Turning misdemeanors into felonies, denying people benefits if you get arrested for protesting. This is America's reckoning. I mean, I want to make sure that people are aware of this. Whenever I talk to people, they say, "Hey, how you doing?" I say, "I'm enjoying the revolution. I hope you're doing the same." And they're like, "Oh, you seriously think it's a revolution?" And let me share this with your audience. We all familiar, and I know that you heard this before, brother, but Dick Gregory taught me that, when you're preaching to the choir, reminder that the choir needs practice.
Right.
So we're all familiar with Martin Luther King's last speech, but we're not as familiar with his next to his last speech that was delivered right here in Washington, D.C., March 31st, 1968. It was entitled Remaining Awake During a Great Revolution. And he goes on to say that many times people find themselves living in great periods of social change, but yet they fail to develop the new ideas, the new attitudes, the new mental responses that the new situation demands. They end up sleeping through a revolution. And hence why we say stay woke. And I think that this case is one of those moments where we can actually say that things will never be the same after this. Everything that was politically impossible before COVID is not politically impossible after COVID. And Derek Chauvin is that case for law enforcement.
And can I just add to that, because I really appreciate this. This is part of what I really appreciate you for, Kymone, is that when we talk about revolution, I just want to add that, like, when I was, obviously it was years ago, so I was younger. I was going to say when I was younger, everybody was younger years ago. But, I was in Eastern Europe in the Soviet world when communism fell. So I saw that happen up close, right? And the thing about revolutionary transformations, whatever kind, is nobody thinks they're going to happen until they happen. They seem, because they're outside the frame of reference, of experience that people have had, they assume it won't happen. It's like everybody's driving through the world with a rear view mirror instead of looking at the windshield ahead of them. And so what you said really resonates with me because, look, everybody would have said before the murder of George Floyd, nobody would have said that in the middle of a pandemic, millions of people would come out to create a global movement around that. 2011, nobody would have said Occupy would change the way people talk about the economy. I mean, we could use a million examples, but these are all like sparks before the big conflagration, I think. So I appreciate that. And I guess part of, how I always approach an event like this, besides the human tragedy of it, is how can we use this to educate? How can we use this instead of making people more comfortable in their little boxes? Let's say I'm a mainstream Democratic politician and I use this to say, oh, I stood up for justice. But when the next George Floyd is killed and there aren't any videos, people making videos, there will be no conviction. How would you say, Kymone Freeman, that we use this to teach people about the real revolutionary change that we do need?
I think the most fundamental thing that we can do is to decrease our level of dependency on the system and increase our interdependency on each other. And what I mean by that, we need to stop this paternal relationship with the government as if they know what's best for us and they tell us what we're allowed to do. We have to recognize that the greatest power is convincing people they don't have it. And I think that no one's going to tell you when, things have changed. No one's going to tell you when the rules of engagement have changed to your favor. No one's going to inform you of that. You have to sense that. A fighter in a ring kind of senses that. Just like when Ali was fighting George Foreman, no one thought that he could have a chance of beating George Foreman. But he had a plan. And when he sensed the moment that he can enact that plan, and when the tide had turned, when the power had dissipated from his opponent, and now he had absorbed all the punishment, all the stuff that he could take, and now he's able to dish it back out. I think we're at that moment in America where the people are at that has been emboldened, and the oppressor has been weakened to the point that they are going to have to reflect the will of the people. Because let's be honest, it's not radical to say that we should have health care for everybody. It's not radical to say that the police shouldn't be killing unarmed people with impunity. It's not radical to say that Social Security should be expanded and we should have nonviolent drug offenders released from prison because they're political prisoners at this point. Those are not radical ideas. Those are things that are supported by the majority of people in America, right? But they're not reflected in the people that are supposed to represent the people in America. And that is the contrast. That is the struggle. That is the conflict. And I think it's coming to a head. As I said before, everything that was politically impossible is now politically inevitable. We've now in a situation where there's not been evictions, at least in most places around the country, has not been evictions for over a year. So, housing is a human right. We've been trying to say that for years. We are looking at a different world, and we're going to get an opportunity to have input in shaping that world. But we have to first know it's possible. That's the first thing, to know it's possible. And then secondly, to know that we are capable of doing what needs to be done. And that is creating and molding and shaping a new framework in America. And I think that we're nearing that moment, that great reckoning moment in American history right now.
Kymone, I love what you just said. I hear a little bit of anarchism in what you're saying, the best of it to me. And David Graeber, who was, the anthropologist and anarchist, was on this show a few times, passed away. But, he said something along the lines of the big secret about this world is that we made it this way and we can make it differently. And I hear a little Malcolm X in what you're saying, too, in terms of, community self-reliance and kind of making the oppressive systems redundant. And I just wonder, when we talk about sparks that set off revolutionary change, I have to say, I just wonder what's going to happen when everybody's kind of talking in political circles, like, we kind of got through this pandemic thing is going to wind down, people are getting vaccinated, businesses are going to open, whatever. I kind of wonder about that because, there's going to come a time that those eviction bans end. And all of a sudden landlords say, okay, where's my $8,000, my $16,000?
That's the flashpoint.
That's what you got where I was going with this, right? Yeah.
Because it's been kicking the can down the road. They have not canceled rent. They have not forgiven rent. They have just been kicking the can down the road. And that day is coming. And we need to get ready for that. And I can say, and to give your listeners a little bit more information, what I mean by decreasing our level of dependence on the system, instead of go looking for a job and trying to find some place, some corporate entity, some national chain, which a lot of them have been closing, we need to start creating co-ops.
Right.
Where it's community owned. And we own it. Because if you travel around America, you would see a lot of these cities look alike now. They look like strip malls. They all got, a Walmart and a McDonald's and, they're corn. There used to be some uniqueness to every city because they had their own businesses, their own flavor. And we're going to get back to that. It's coming. It's going to be forced to get back to that. But I think the flashpoint would be when police show up to evict people. Yeah, that would be the flashpoint, and I would like to see the people resist that. I know I am. I'm behind. Well, actually, I'm current now because I've got a letter saying that my building applied for some funds, and so now I'm current.
But up to that, you are behind. Yeah,
Yeah, so I'm gonna get behind again. Because I'm
interesting.
I'm solidarity with the people.
Well, it's interesting looping back though, because I was thinking that we started off with the police, that you can bet the police are going to show up to evict people for not paying rent. But how often have the police shown up because a landlord didn't fix the heat, didn't
Exactly.
fix the roof. I mean, who are they protecting in this
You raised a great
equation?
point that we made when we had a council rent event at WEAC Radio, because unbeknownst to me, the laws that's on the book in Washington, D.C., the nation's capital, there that you can have a restaurant and will get shut down immediately by some of the violations that these people are subjected to live in
Right.
with slumlords, of which Trump is the son of a slumlord, I might add. So we had a slumlord son as the president. So that's what we get for garbage in, garbage out. But on the books, there are laws in the nation's capital that will shut down a business, but will same laws are not applied to the living conditions of poor people. And I just think that's just crazy and ironic. And I want to give a shout out to Nancy Altman, president of Social Security Works, who co-authored a beautiful article on Common Dreams with me. And we talked about some of the things that would be revolutionary in changing the police. And at the top of the list is the word defund the police. And when we mean that we mean reallocate resources. The police do not need to be militarized. That is just, police do not need tanks.
Right.
We saw what the police look like in Ferguson, okay? But then we didn't see that January 6th in the nation's capital, but we saw that in Ferguson, Missouri, okay? Let's be real. I had to point that out. And then two, even before Black Lives Matter, even before all of this became widely accepted as fact, even before all of that, there was millions of dollars awarded to civilians for police misconduct. And it didn't come from the police department's budget. It didn't come from the police officer in question's act, right, or his fund, or his pension, or his salary, or what have you. It came out of the taxpayers' money. So the taxpayers paying for their own brutality. But if those lawsuits was financially responsible by the police department, financially responsible by the officer in question, we would have a change in behavior overnight. That's what we should be pushing for. And that's what they really mean when they talk about get rid of the immunity, that's what they really mean. But they need to say it specifically that they want them to be held financially responsible for their actions. And then thirdly, and I think this is almost just as important, is that you have to have community policing. You cannot have police officers from West Virginia, no disrespect to West Virginia, West Virginia and Washington, D.C. policing the streets. How is that supposed to work? You wouldn't have a guy from Southeast policing the streets in West Virginia. You need to have.
I'd like to see that, actually. I would buy tickets to that.
Yes, we have community policing. I need to be from the area. I need to know. I need to know who lives in this community. Because if I know your mother, I'm going to treat you a little bit different when I pull you over. Didn't I tell you last time? That's a whole different conversation. But people want to tell you, oh, you're not able to require that police live in a certain area. I'm like, why not? The politicians got to live in the area they represent. The mayor got to live in the city they represent. The councilmen will have to live in the area of the city they represent. Why not the police? That would be the textbook definition of community policing, and that will eliminate a lot of confrontation.
And those last two items that you mentioned, Kymone, they're connected, right? Because the militarization of the police is all this military equipment that the Army's done with. So they give it to police departments so that police departments can treat our own people the way they treat the people we colonize and brutalize around the world. And then you add to that the fact that the police that are now operating these these tanks and other highly weaponized vehicles and so on, you add to that the fact that they're now from the community, and it really is a military occupation at that point in my mind.
Absolutely.
And I don't know how else to get rid of it except stop giving this military equipment to the police because they don't ever need it. And you see it in these little towns in Iowa with like 600 people in them, and they got an Abrams tank or so. It's insanity. And have the people be in the community, and I know you support this too, have them accountable to the community. so that it's not a distant force that's behind them, but as if you're in my neighborhood, roughing up beating up my kids or doing anything else, you better be answerable to the counselor, whatever it is that we've got in my community to hold you to it. And of course, by my community, I mean every community, and I mean especially black communities
Yeah.
in this case.
Definitely a citizen review board with the power to hire and fire. Definitely. Yeah, that will be another tenement of community policing. Let's be clear that this is all part of the military-industrial complex that President Dwight D. Eisenhower warned us about in his last speech to America. He goes on to say that every gun, every bullet, every tank, every warship, in effect, is theft from the people. I urge everyone to go back and listen to President Eisenhower's farewell speech about the military-industrial complex, because one of the few things America continues to manufacture itself is weapons. And they give the surplus of those weapons to the police departments, and that helps keep this thing rolling. And that's what they're intending to do. And this is America's reckoning. We're either going to be a fascist state or we're going to be a utopia. It's going to be one or the other. And I'm looking forward to that great day, what they say in the Civil War, that great getting up on it when this.
Yeah. All right. Well. I'll be there. I'll be there. And I guess this is as good a time as any to wrap, or good as thought as good a thought to end on as any. I almost didn't get that out. So Kymone Freeman, artist, playwright, co-founder of We Act Radio, and activist. As always, man, great talking to you. And as always, thanks for coming on the program.
Stay safe, stay strong, stay woke. Peace.
Peace. And we'll be right back after this. I'm Richard RJ Eskow, and this is the Zero Hour.